They walked among us, like any ordinary couple, but they were far from ordinary. Ed and Lorraine Warren, two names that became synonymous with terror, mystery, and the unexplained. Behind the smiles printed in newspaper photos hid a life dedicated to fighting evil, an evil many refused to believe in, but they swore was real. The kind that lurks in shadows, that invades homes, that destroys souls. Who were Ed and Lorraine Warren really heroes, frauds, or something even more disturbing? To understand, we must go back to the beginning. Before the fame, before the headlines, before the fear that spread across the world, Edward Warren Miney was born in 1926 in the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Since childhood, Ed claimed, his house was haunted. He heard footsteps, whispers, saw lights flickering on by themselves. And more than that, he said he could see the dead. At 5 years old, Ed would wake up in the middle of the night to find strange figures hovering beside his bed. Spirits, he said. Apparitions, some benevolent, others not so much. Lorraine Rita Moran was born in 1927, also in Connecticut. Unlike Ed, Lorraine came from a religious, traditional family, but there was something about her, something that set her apart. Since the age of 9, she claimed to have an unusual sensitivity, a gift. Lorraine said she could see people's auras, feel their pain, read their darkest secrets, just by looking into their eyes. When Ed and Lorraine met, still teenagers, something instantly bound them. Something beyond love, a purpose, a calling, as if fate had chosen them. Ed served in the Navy during World War II. When he returned, he married Lorraine. Together, they chose an unusual path, one that would place them face to face with evil in its purest form. They became paranormal investigators, demonologists, ghost hunters, but to them, it wasn't ghosts haunting the homes. It was something far worse. In the early years, they started with small visits, friends' houses, reports of strange noises, doors slamming on their own, objects moving. At first, they seemed like isolated events, things that might have a logical explanation, but something always pulled them deeper. There was always a detail, a chill down the spine, an empty stare from a resident, a sudden stench of rot that came from nowhere. One night, they were called to a house on the outskirts of Hartford. The family reported hearing voices coming from the basement. The father, a skeptic, said he feared for his wife's sanity. But when Ed and Lorraine entered the house, both immediately felt the weight in the air, that kind of heaviness that seems to drain all energy from the room, the kind of heaviness that comes just before something terrible happens. They went down to the basement. The air was thick, suffocating, as if something were watching them. Lorraine stopped halfway down the stairs, closed her eyes, and whispered, "He's here." A man, she said, not a normal man, a spirit, trapped, filled with rage, thirsty for revenge. That was the first of many sleepless nights, the first of many invisible battles. Over the years, Ed and Lorraine were called to more intense cases. Cases where even priests refused to enter. Homes where entire families were torn apart by madness. One such case left a permanent mark on them. A small house in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. The year, 1971. The Smurl family. What began with strange sounds quickly escalated into violent attacks. Scratches, blows, an unbearable stench like rotting flesh. Lorraine, upon crossing the doorway, fainted. She later said she felt an evil so dense, her very soul buckled under it. Ed began to draw what he saw. Dark shapes, creatures with black eyes, twisted figures prowling the rooms, waiting for a moment of weakness. And always, the same feeling, that they were being watched, hunted. In every case, the pattern repeated. the house always seemed darker than it truly was. The air colder and the silence heavier. But there was something no one knew, something the couple themselves avoided talking about. In their darkest nights, when they returned home, Ed and Lorraine felt that the evil had followed them, that it didn't stay behind in the houses they investigated, doors slammed in the dead of night. The crucifixes on their walls would fall on their own. The family dog howled at nothing. Lorraine would wake up screaming, and Ed could no longer sleep without a gun by his bedside. Not to protect against thieves, but against what couldn't be seen. And then came the case that placed them at the center of it all. The case that turned Ed and Lorraine Warren into legends. It was a doll, an old rag doll, with a stitched smile and hollow eyes. Annabelle. The doll was given to them by two terrified young women. They claimed the doll moved on its own, wrote messages in blood, tried to suffocate them in their sleep. Ed knew this wasn't a simple ghost. Lorraine confirmed it. The evil was inside the doll. A demonic spirit in disguise. A spirit seeking a host. A body. A soul. They locked Annabelle in a glass case, sealed it with prayers, but they never stopped fearing she might escape. Because, according to them, the evil inside her never sleeps. With each case, the darkness around them grew. The threats intensified. The nights became longer, and the enemies more cunning. They weren't just fighting spirits, but something much older. Something that fed on fear. Something that stared back at them. Ed and Lorraine found themselves haunted not only by demons, but by doubt, by skeptics, by those who claimed it was all a hoax, a lie. But the couple never backed down, because to them, stepping away meant condemning innocent souls to eternal torment. But deep down, there was a secret they never revealed publicly. Something only they knew. Something that consumed them night after night. That night, while investigating one of the darkest cases of their lives, Ed heard a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere. A whisper that called his name. Lorraine felt the presence before even entering the house. Something was waiting for them inside. Something that would change everything. And then the door creaked open, the air turned ice cold, and a voice echoed in the darkness. The voice was cold, dry, almost a whisper, but it carried an unbearable weight. Ed felt his body tremble. Cold sweat trickled down his back. Lorraine couldn't move. It was as if something held them in place, as if the air around them had turned to concrete. What happened next would mark their lives forever. The house in question was old, built in the 19th century. It had been the stage for tragedies, death, suicides, whispers of dark rituals held in the basement. The family living there was on the brink of madness. Objects flew out the windows. Voices echoed in the night. The children woke up covered in scratches. And in one of the rooms, the smell of sulfur was unbearable, as if hell itself was breathing inside. That night, Ed and Lorraine decided to act. They placed crucifixes in every room, salt across the doorways. Prayers whispered, almost begged. But the evil seemed to mock every attempt. Pictures fell from the walls. Candles extinguished themselves. And the whispers grew louder, closer. Lorraine collapsed to her knees. She felt the weight of hundreds of souls, screaming, crying, begging for release. Ed wielded his faith like a sword, shouting prayers while the floor trembled beneath him. That night, something left. but not without leaving a mark. The house's walls were etched with strange symbols. The mirrors shattered, and the family left before dawn, leaving behind an empty home, forever haunted. This was just another chapter. The couple began to realize the evil they faced was growing bolder, as if the more they tried to contain it, the stronger it became. Other cases followed, like the Perron house, a secluded farmhouse in Rhode Island. The Perron family sought peace and found terror. When Lorraine stepped into the house, she felt the presence of a female entity, a woman marked by pain, hatred, a thirst for vengeance. Bathsheba, a name that would haunt the Warrens' nights for years. The farmhouse became a battleground. Objects flew with violence. The daughters were dragged by their hair. The mother awoke with bruises. Bathsheba's presence was so intense that Lorraine once said she had never encountered such a cruel force. And then, the Enfield case, London. A family destroyed by fear. A girl, Janet, 12 years old, possessed according to Ed and Lorraine. She spoke in voices that weren't hers, was thrown against the walls, dragged across the floor by invisible hands. The skeptics claimed it was fake, that Janet was acting, craving attention. But those who entered that house, who felt the cold, the suffocating silence, the weight in the air, never forgot. And as the cases multiplied, so did the scrutiny. The newspapers branded them publicity, hunters, frauds. Skeptics laughed at their stories, said it was theater, that they were actors in a macabre performance. But the couple kept going, because to them, evil was real, and it was everywhere. At the Warrens Occult Museum in Connecticut, objects collected from each case were stored. Dolls, mirrors, boxes, amulets, each one sealed. Each one, according to them, containing a force that had to be kept from the world. Ed would say the museum was the most dangerous place on earth, that entering it was like walking through hell itself. Lorraine, always quieter, would simply confirm with her eyes, because she knew. She knew what those objects held. She knew the price they paid to keep them there. Lorraine grew more sensitive. She spent sleepless nights, heard voices, even at home. Ed suffered vivid nightmares. He would wake up screaming, often with marks on his body. Scratches, bruises, as if during the night he fought invisible battles. And then came Amityville, the house that would become the greatest symbol of modern horror, the house where a man, Ronald DeFeo Jr., murdered his entire family with a rifle, the house where, according to the Warrens, the evil remained, where ancient forces fed on the tragedy. When Ed and Lorraine stepped into that house, something changed. Ed himself said he had never felt such oppression. The weight was unbearable. The air, thick. The silence, deafening. Lorraine collapsed the moment she crossed the door. She cried. She trembled. She said she had come face to face with evil itself. Amityville turned the Warrens into legends, but it also brought even more criticism. The house was accused of being the stage of an elaborate hoax. Later residents claimed to have seen nothing. The media called it a fabrication. But Ed and Lorraine knew what they had felt. They knew evil doesn't always show itself. It hides. It adapts. It waits for the perfect moment to strike. And then came the final price. Ed suffered a heart attack. He was at home after one of the darkest cases they'd ever investigated. He said, just before collapsing, that he felt something watching him, that the evil was there. Lorraine, by his side, felt the world fall apart. But even after that, even with his body weakened, Ed didn't stop, because he knew that stopping would mean opening the gates of hell. Lorraine stayed by his side until his final breath, until the very end. But what many don't know is that before passing, Ed confided something to a close priest, something never made public, something that perhaps explained the secrets the Warrens carried, a secret that could change everything. The priest never revealed it. He only said that some truths should never be spoken aloud. Some truths are far too dangerous. Today, Ed is gone. Lorraine too. But the museum remains. The stories endure. And the evil never disappeared. Some still say the objects in the museum sometimes move on their own, that the doll's eyes shift direction. That, at night, whispers echo through the halls, that Ed and Lorraine, even from beyond, continue the fight, because evil never sleeps, never rests, and never forgets. You may not believe, you may laugh at the stories, but the next time you hear a whisper in the dark, or feel that chill down your spine, remember, they always said, evil is closer than we think.